My father left our $12 million construction company to my stepbrother who couldn't tell a Phillips head from a flathead screwdriver. Big mistake since I'd been the one building every client relationship for 20 years. Welcome to Revenge Galore. If you crave real gripping stories where justice hits hard and betrayal never goes unpunished, this channel is your new favorite place. Please subscribe. My name is Tyler Whitman, and at 52 I thought I understood what family loyalty meant. 25 years building Whitman Construction from a two-man operation into the premier commercial contractor in Central Texas. 25 years of 5 a.m. starts, mud-caked boots, and handshake deals that meant more than any legal contract. I transformed my father's struggling business into an empire that employed 93 people and commanded respect from Dallas to Austin. But apparently, none of that mattered when it came time to read the will. Blood isn't everything, my stepmother Patricia had whispered to me as the lawyer closed the folder containing my father's final betrayal. She was right about one thing: blood wasn't everything. But neither was a master's degree in business administration from Rice University, which seemed to be the only qualification my stepbrother Derek possessed for inheriting everything I'd built. I stood up from the mahogany conference table in attorney Harold Morrison's office, nodded politely at the family members who just watched me get robbed in broad daylight, and walked out without saying a word. My half-sister Sarah followed me to the parking lot, tears streaming down her face. "Tyler, this isn't right," she said, her voice breaking. "Dad always said you were the heart of the business. Everyone knows you built Whitman Construction into what it is today." I unlocked my F-250 and paused, looking back at the downtown Austin office building where my father's legacy had just been handed to someone who'd never swung a hammer in anger. Maybe he did, Sarah. But apparently hearts don't inherit construction companies. The drive back to my ranch outside Dripping Springs gave me time to think about how we'd gotten here. 25 years ago, when I was 27 and fresh out of Texas A&M with a degree in construction management, my father Ray had brought me into Whitman Construction as a junior project manager. Back then, we were barely surviving, taking whatever small commercial jobs we could find and competing against bigger firms that undercut us on every bid. Ray was a good man and a skilled carpenter, but he was better at building things than building businesses. The company was hemorrhaging money, relationships with subcontractors were strained, and our reputation in the industry was shaky at best. I changed that, one project at a time, one relationship at a time. I learned every subcontractor's specialty, every supplier's delivery schedule, every inspector's preferences. When Rodriguez Electrical needed emergency work during a downtown office renovation, I personally coordinated their crew scheduling and materials delivery to save their contract. When Hill Country Concrete faced a cash flow crisis during the 2008 recession, I extended our payment terms and helped them secure financing that kept them operational. The business grew because I made it grow. Revenue jumped from $800,000 annually to over $12 million under my leadership. We expanded from residential remodeling to major commercial projects. Our client list included 3 school districts, the city of Austin, and some of the largest private developers in Central Texas. But I never asked for credit. Never demanded my name on the company letterhead. I figured the work spoke for itself, and that competence would eventually be rewarded with ownership. Derek, meanwhile, had spent his 20s getting an undergraduate degree in marketing, followed by an MBA that his mother insisted would bring modern business practices to our outdated family company. When he finally joined Whitman Construction 3 years ago, Ray gave him the title of Strategic Development Director and a corner office he'd rarely occupied. Derek talked about leveraging synergies and optimizing operational efficiency, but he couldn't read a blueprint or understand why we needed to coordinate 17 different trades on a single project. When longtime client Morrison Development called about a rush job to repair storm damage at one of their shopping centers, Derek suggested we charge premium rates because market conditions support surge pricing. I'd had to pull him aside and explain that Morrison had been our client for 12 years, had recommended us to 6 other developers, and had helped us through the recession by paying invoices early when we needed cash flow. We gave them fair prices because that's how you build lasting relationships in construction. But Derek saw my approach as leaving money on the table. He started documenting our conversations and presenting them to Ray as evidence that my methods were preventing the company from reaching its full potential. The warning signs had been there for months, but I'd ignored them, assuming that competence would triumph over politics. Ray had started including Derek in client meetings where his inexperience showed. Patricia would steer family dinner conversations toward Derek's innovative ideas for modernizing operations. Last month, I'd noticed that my authority to approve change orders over $50,000 had been quietly reduced to $25,000. I should have seen this inheritance decision coming, but I'd been too focused on actually running the business to play family politics. Growing up, I'd been the kid who helped Ray organize tools in the garage while other kids played video games. After my mother died when I was 19, construction work had become our way of grieving together. We'd spend hours on job sites and Ray would tell me stories about building the business from nothing. "This company is more than just construction, Tyler," he'd say while we walked through a project. "It's about keeping your word. People hire us because they trust us to do what we promise." When Ray married Patricia 5 years later, everything changed. She brought Derek into our family, and suddenly I wasn't the only son anymore. At first, I'd welcomed it. Derek was intelligent and ambitious, and Ray seemed happier having another young man around the house. But Patricia had plans. She pushed Derek toward business school while suggesting I should focus on operational management rather than strategic leadership. She'd praised Derek's academic achievements at family gatherings while treating my industry knowledge like it was just skilled labor. Slowly, Ray started seeing things her way. The real shift had begun when Derek graduated with his MBA. Ray threw a party and announced that Derek would be joining the company as a future leader. I'd been proud. Family businesses need fresh perspectives and new ideas. What I hadn't expected was how quickly Derek would position himself as the heir apparent, or how effectively Patricia would reinforce his importance while diminishing mine. Derek talked a good game about efficiency and growth strategies, but he fundamentally misunderstood the construction business. When longtime client Austin Independent School District called about a potential $3 million gymnasium renovation, Derek immediately started talking about value engineering and cost optimization strategies. I'd had to explain that AISD had worked with us for 8 years because we delivered quality projects on time and on budget. They weren't looking for the cheapest bid, they were looking for reliable performance. Derek's approach would have lost us the contract and damaged a relationship that generated steady revenue. But Derek saw my caution as resistance to innovation. He started scheduling client calls without including me, then briefing Ray on conversations where important details got lost in translation. He'd suggest process changes that sounded impressive but ignored practical realities of construction scheduling and coordination. The final months before Ray's death, I'd watched my influence shrink while Derek's grew. He got invited to banker meetings and strategic planning sessions. Patricia handled legal consultations and insurance renewals. I kept running day-to-day operations, but the bigger decisions happened without me. I told myself it was temporary. Ray was sick with cancer, and maybe he needed Derek's energy to help him feel optimistic about the future. I'd never imagined he'd actually cut me out of the inheritance completely. The funeral had been on a Thursday. The will reading was the following Monday. In between, I'd spent the weekend going through Ray's office, organizing files and project documentation that Derek would need to understand the business he'd just inherited. That's when I'd found the real estate folder. Ray had been quietly restructuring company assets for the past 18 months. The main office building, which I'd assumed was owned by Whitman Construction, had been transferred to a family trust controlled by Patricia. Equipment leases I'd negotiated were restructured with Derek as the primary guarantor. Even the company bank accounts had been changed to require dual signatures, Derek and Patricia. But the worst discovery was the letter hidden in Ray's desk drawer. It was a draft of a note he'd apparently planned to give me, never finished but clearly legible. "Tyler, you've been the backbone of this business since you were 27. I know this decision might seem unfair, but Derek needs this opportunity to prove himself. You're strong enough to build something new. He isn't strong enough to live in your shadow." I'd read it 3 times before folding it back up. Ray knew. He knew exactly what he was doing to me, and he'd convinced himself it was some kind of favor. He thought I was so capable that I didn't need the business I'd spent my adult life building. He thought Derek was so fragile that he needed everything handed to him on a platter. I didn't throw anything. Didn't yell. Didn't break down. I just sat there in Ray's leather chair for 2 hours, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. When Sarah called that evening to check on me, I kept my voice steady. "How are you handling all this?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. Derek got what he wanted. Now he gets to prove he can handle it. "But Tyler, you built that company. Everyone in the industry knows that." "Yeah, well, now everyone gets to see what it looks like without me." After hanging up, I walked out to my workshop and pulled out a box I'd been saving for years. Inside were business cards, letterhead, and incorporation papers for a company I'd registered 6 years ago but never activated. Lone Star Construction Solutions. I'd set it up during a particularly frustrating period when I'd wondered if I should go independent. The paperwork had been sitting there ever since, like a backup plan I'd hoped I'd never need. I powered up my laptop and started making a list, not of what I'd lost but of what I actually controlled. The list was longer than I'd expected. Derek had inherited a company, but I'd built the relationships, negotiated the contracts and earned the trust. Those things weren't assets you could transfer with a signature. They were assets that walked out the door with me. The morning after the will reading, I drove to the Whitman Construction office at my usual time. Derek's Lexus was already in the parking lot, the first time he'd arrived before 7 a.m. in 3 years. I found him in Ray's office, sitting behind the desk like he belonged there, laptop open and papers scattered across the surface. "Tyler," he said without looking up, "good you're here. I've been reviewing our operational structure, and I think we need to make some immediate changes." I leaned against the door frame. "What kind of changes?" "Well, for starters, I'm going to be taking a more hands-on approach to client relationships. I've already scheduled meetings with our top 5 accounts this week. I want to introduce myself as the new owner and discuss how we can optimize their project delivery." My stomach dropped. "Derek, these relationships took years to build. Barging in with talk about optimization is going to make them nervous." He finally looked up, and I could see Patricia's smugness in his expression. "Tyler, I appreciate everything you've done here, but I have an MBA and a fresh perspective. These clients need to understand that Whitman Construction is evolving." Evolving into what? Into a modern, data-driven operation that maximizes value for all stakeholders. I walked into the office and sat down across from him. "Derek, Morrison Development has been working with us for 12 years. Austin ISD trusts us because we've never missed a deadline or gone over budget. These aren't stakeholders, they're relationships." "Exactly my point," he said, closing his laptop. "We've been leaving money on the table by treating business like it's personal. These relationships need to be profitable first, friendly second." Over the next 3 days, I watched Derek systematically alienate our best clients. He rescheduled project inspections to optimize our workflow, without consulting anyone about impact on completion timelines. He proposed new billing structures that would increase our margins but ignore the payment terms I'd negotiated over years of partnership. When Morrison Development called me directly to complain about Derek's approach, I found myself in an impossible position. "What's going on over there, Tyler?" asked Jack Morrison, a man I'd worked with for over a decade. "This new guy comes in telling me we need to restructure our partnership for mutual value optimization. I've been developing properties for 25 years, and I've never heard such nonsense." "Jack, Derek is still learning the business. Give him some time." "Time for what? To price us out of working with you? He wants to increase our standard rates by 15% and eliminate the payment flexibility that's helped us through tight cash flow periods. You know our seasonal challenges, this would kill our partnership." I'd promised to talk to Derek, but when I approached him about Morrison's concerns, he brushed me off completely. "Tyler, you're too emotionally attached to these old agreements. Morrison Development represents 18% of our annual revenue. If they can't pay market rates, we'll find clients who can. Derek, they represent 18% of our revenue because I've spent 12 years making sure they stay happy. You can't just replace that overnight. Watch me." By Friday, I had 4 more angry clients calling my personal phone. Derek had demanded immediate payment from Austin ISD even though they'd been on a 45-day billing cycle for 8 years. He tried to renegotiate our exclusive maintenance contract with Riverside Mall, suggesting they should pay us a retainer for the privilege of being our preferred client. The final straw came when I overheard him on a call with our biggest supplier, Hill Country Materials. "I don't care what my stepbrother promised you," Derek was saying. "I'm the owner now and we're going to bid this contract out to multiple suppliers. Your pricing needs to be competitive if you want to keep our business." I walked into his office and quietly closed the door. "Derek, Hill Country Materials has been our primary supplier for 8 years. They gave us preferential pricing during the recession and priority delivery during material shortages. You can't just threaten them." "Tyler, this is exactly the kind of thinking that's held this company back. Loyalty doesn't show up on profit and loss statements." "No, but trust does. And you're burning through 20 years of it in 1 week." He stood up and faced me, his inexperience masked by inherited authority. "This is my company now, Tyler. If you can't support my vision, maybe you should consider other options." I stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Maybe I should. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and my laptop, researching something that had been nagging at me. Derek's confidence seemed too calculated, too specific. Nobody was that arrogant without backup. I started with public records. The family trust that now controlled our real estate had been established 14 months ago, not recently like I'd assumed. Patricia had been planning this transfer long before Ray got sick. But more interesting were the corporate filings I found for something called Pinnacle Development Group, Derek's personal investment entity created 18 months ago. A few phone calls to industry contacts revealed the bigger picture. My friend Carlos at Austin Electrical mentioned that Derek had been asking questions about our subcontractor relationships for months, claiming he was doing strategic analysis for Ray. He'd specifically wanted to know about contract terms, billing arrangements, and performance standards. Maria Santos at Central Texas Bank let slip that Derek had been in discussions about restructuring our business loans, using projections that assumed significant cost reductions in labor and supplier expenses. But the real revelation came from an unexpected source. My nephew Jake worked in commercial real estate, and when I mentioned the family trust, he got quiet. "Tyler, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I helped Patricia look at some properties about 8 months ago. She was shopping for warehouse space in Round Rock, said she was planning a new business venture." "What kind of business?" "Construction services." She specifically asked about proximity to major highways and rail access. Had detailed questions about zoning for equipment storage and material staging. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about Derek inheriting the family business. They were planning to gut it. I spent the weekend digging deeper. Derek had incorporated Pinnacle Construction Services 4 months ago. The business address was a warehouse in Round Rock that Patricia had quietly purchased through the family trust. They'd even applied for contractor licensing and begun preliminary discussions with potential clients. The plan was becoming clear. Inherit Whitman Construction, extract its valuable contracts and relationships, then shift operations to their new company while letting the original business collapse. They'd keep the profitable parts and dump the legacy obligations, employee benefits, equipment leases, facility maintenance. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed the relationships belonged to the Whitman name instead of to me personally. On Monday morning, I made a series of phone calls. "Jack, this is Tyler Whitman. I wanted to give you a heads up about some changes coming to our business relationship." "What kind of changes?" "Well, I'm not going to be with Whitman Construction much longer. But I wanted you to know that I'm exploring options to continue serving your construction needs through a different arrangement." Jack was quiet for a moment. "Tyler, if you're leaving, we're probably leaving too. You're the only reason we've stayed loyal to that company." I had similar conversations with Austin ISD, Riverside Mall, and a dozen other key accounts. None of them expressed any interest in continuing relationships with Derek. All of them asked about following me to whatever I did next. My most important call was to Roberto Vega at Hill Country Materials. "Roberto, I need to ask you something straight. Are you willing to work with Derek directly, or have you been dealing with Whitman Construction because of me?" Roberto laughed. "Tyler, you personally guaranteed our payment terms when your company was struggling 3 years ago. You think we're going to stick around for some kid who just threatened to put our business up for bid? So if I told you I was starting something new? I'd ask when you need your first delivery." By Tuesday evening, I had commitments from every critical supplier and promises from 75% of our client base. Derek thought he'd inherited a business, but what he'd actually inherited was a name and some buildings. The real business was walking out the door with me. Wednesday morning, I activated Lone Star Construction Solutions. I'd spent 6 years building the infrastructure without realizing it. The business license was current, the commercial insurance was ready to transfer, and I'd established preliminary banking relationships during a period when I'd been frustrated with Whitman Construction's bank service. My first move was to secure the warehouse space Jake had mentioned, not the one Patricia had bought, but a better facility 2 miles away that the owner had been struggling to lease. I negotiated a 3-year agreement with options to expand, then called the best crew leaders from Whitman Construction. "Miguel, this is Tyler. Do you have a few minutes to talk privately?" Miguel Hernandez had been our lead superintendent for 14 years. He was the guy who coordinated between trades and kept projects on schedule. More importantly, he was the guy clients trusted to deliver quality work on time. "What's going on, Tyler?" "Things have been weird around here since Derek took over. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. How would you feel about making a change?" "Depends on the change. I'm starting my own operation. Same work, same standards, better pay. You interested?" "When do we start?" Within 3 days, I had commitments from 12 of our 15 best employees. I didn't poach anyone, I simply offered opportunities to people who were already frustrated with Derek's management style. When word spread that I was planning something new, they came to me. The hardest part was timing the contract transitions. I needed to fulfill existing Whitman Construction obligations while positioning myself for new arrangements. My solution was to become a contractor. I called Derek on Thursday morning. Derek, I've been thinking about your suggestion that I consider other options. I'd like to propose something that might work for both of us. I'm listening. I'm going to start doing some independent consulting work, but I'm willing to help Whitman Construction transition by handling some of our existing client relationships on a contract basis. You'd pay me a fee and I'd manage the accounts that know me personally. That way you can focus on developing new business while maintaining revenue from existing relationships. Derek was silent for a moment. I could almost hear him calculating. He needed those client relationships, but his ego wanted me gone. The contractor arrangement gave him both. What kind of fee are we talking about? 20% of gross revenue from any accounts I manage. That seems high. Derek, Morrison Development alone represents over $2 million in annual business. If they walk because of relationship issues, you lose the entire revenue stream. 20% of something is better than 100% of nothing. He agreed, probably because he thought it was temporary. What he didn't realize was that this arrangement gave me legal cover to maintain direct relationships with our key accounts while building my own operation. Over the next 2 weeks, I began transitioning clients to my contractor services. Officially, they were still working with Whitman Construction. Practically, they were dealing exclusively with me. Derek seemed happy because the revenue kept flowing. Patricia was pleased because I was technically no longer an employee. The clients were satisfied because nothing had changed from their perspective. But behind the scenes, I was building something new. Every client conversation included subtle mentions of my consulting business. Every supplier interaction reinforced my personal relationships. Every employee who joined me was learning our new systems while maintaining their old responsibilities. Derek thought he was outsourcing his problem accounts to me. Actually, he was paying me to steal his business. The transition period would last exactly 30 days. After that, the contracts would shift to Lone Star Construction Solutions, and Whitman Construction would discover what a company looks like when it's just buildings and paperwork. The call came on a Tuesday morning in November. I was in my new office at Lone Star Construction Solutions, reviewing project schedules with Miguel, when my phone rang. It was Sarah. Tyler, you need to know something. Derek is in Ray's old office with Patricia and some guy in a suit. They look panicked. What kind of suit? The kind that carries briefcases and delivers bad news. An hour later I had my answer. Carlos Bradley from Central Texas Bank called me directly. Tyler, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Whitman Construction just defaulted on their operating loan. Derek came in this morning claiming their revenue dropped by 70% overnight. He's blaming some kind of coordinated vendor conspiracy and asking for emergency extensions. I leaned back in my chair looking out at the Austin skyline. What did you tell him? Same thing I'd tell anyone whose business model just collapsed overnight. The bank needs collateral recovery to begin immediately. By afternoon, the news was spreading through our industry community. Whitman Construction had lost their major supplier contracts, their key client accounts, and their experienced workforce all in the same month. Equipment payments were bouncing. Payroll was becoming an issue. Derek called me at 4 p.m. Tyler, we need to talk. This contractor arrangement isn't working out the way we planned. How so? Our clients are leaving. Our suppliers are backing out. Something's not right here. Derek, I've been managing the relationships exactly as we agreed. If they're choosing to work with other contractors, that's a business decision on their part. You've been sabotaging us. I've been doing exactly what you paid me to do, managing client relationships. If those relationships don't want to continue with Whitman Construction, that's not sabotage. That's the market speaking. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Tyler, what do you want? I don't want anything, Derek. You got exactly what Ray left you, ownership of Whitman Construction. Congratulations. But there's no business left. There never was a business, Derek. There were just relationships. And relationships don't transfer with ownership papers. I hung up and looked out my office window. Across town, the Whitman Construction sign was still visible on the building where I'd spent 25 years of my life. Tomorrow there would probably be foreclosure notices taped to the doors. But today, for the first time since Ray's funeral, I felt completely at peace. 3 months later, I drove past the old Whitman Construction facility. The sign was gone and a for lease banner hung across the front gate. Derek had filed for bankruptcy protection in January, but there hadn't been enough assets to satisfy the creditors. The building sold at auction to a company that planned to convert it into a self-storage facility. Sarah told me that Derek had moved back to Houston, where he was trying to restart his consulting career. Patricia had quietly sold the Round Rock warehouse and was apparently exploring opportunities in retail development. Neither of them had contacted me since the business collapsed. Lone Star Construction Solutions, meanwhile, was thriving. We'd grown from 12 employees to 28, and our client base had expanded beyond the relationships I'd brought from Whitman Construction. Word spreads quickly in the construction industry, and companies that had heard about our service standards were reaching out for quotes. Miguel had become my operations manager, and he'd hired 5 of his former colleagues from other construction companies. We were building something new, but it felt familiar, like the family business should have felt. On a warm Saturday in March, I was reviewing blueprints in our main office when Jack Morrison stopped by to check on a project timeline. "Tyler, I've got to tell you something," he said as we walked through the staging area. "In 25 years of development, I've never seen someone handle a transition like you did. Most guys in your situation would have burned everything down." I shrugged. "Wasn't my place to burn anything down. I just built something better." Jack nodded and headed back to his truck. After he left, I stood in the parking lot for a few minutes, listening to the sound of crews loading equipment and planning their next day's work. It was the same sound I'd grown up with, but it belonged to me now. I walked inside and looked at the sign above our main entrance. Lone Star Construction Solutions, established 2024. Sometimes the best revenge is simply building the life you actually wanted. What do you think about Tyler's approach to handling family business betrayal? Was his quiet withdrawal and relationship transfer justified, or should he have fought harder for the inheritance? Have you ever faced a situation where your work and expertise weren't properly valued by family members? If you enjoyed this story of construction expertise and relationship building triumphing over inherited entitlement, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Revenge Galore for more tales where hard work and competence triumph over academic credentials and family favoritism. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story where justice hits hard and betrayal never goes unpunished.